really, Richard was one of the very premier authors to really begin to drive home the practice of gratitude and how gratitude changed everything.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Billion Dollar Banker podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Perrone. And as you guys know, this is a show that's built for high achievers by high achievers. And I'm so excited to have an incredible guest with us today, Kristine Carlson. Kristine, welcome to the show.
Hi, Nicole. So good to be with you.
I'm really excited to jump into your background and your bio today. You just have an incredible story to share with so many, and I know you're going to leave our audience with a lot of great insight. And so, guys, you guys want to tune into this one, share it with someone who needs it, leave a comment, go check out Kristine on her website, her podcast platform. Absolutely incredible. If you don't know the name, Kristine Carlson is a New York Times best-selling author, best known for her work with her late husband, Dr. Richard Carlson, in the Don't Sweat the Small Stuff series, which sold, by the way, over 25 million books worldwide, and also became a Lifetime movie starring Heather Locklear, which we're going to get into that amazing story about how that occurred. She's a renowned speaker, inspiring podcast host, a retreat leader, and a blogger. And her mission is really simple, and it's a pretty amazing one. It's to help women transform from heartbreak and loss to live their best lives with joy, gratitude, and renewed passion and purpose. Welcome to the show.
Oh, Nicole, you did a beautiful job with that introduction. Thank you so much.
No, I try to nail it, but tell our audience a little bit about your journey.
Well, if you're familiar with the Don't Sweat the Small Stuff books or you've heard of them, it's probably because it's sitting in someone's bathroom somewhere. It's the perfect reading for the bathroom, of course. That's why we say that. But the books have been around for almost 30 years now, and they've had quite an amazing lifespan. My late husband, Dr. Richard Carlson, wrote the first one in 1997, but it wasn't his first book. It was his 10th book, and he'd been writing for 10 years. So, and people always say, oh, it looks like you guys had this overnight success story, and nothing worth anything is overnight. And it certainly wasn't in his career. There was some very lean years early on. And yet he was only 35 years old. I was 32 when Don't Sweat the Small Stuff became a blockbuster phenomenon all over the world. Um, yeah, so Richard was a psychologist, and he we started our romance at Pepperdine University in the 80s. We met first couple months of school for me, and he was a transfer student, a tennis player, a really like top tennis player. He was seated number one at Pepperdine when I met him. And so Richard was just an overachiever from the very beginning of his life. You know, he achieved many things in his lifetime, being an all-star athlete, an all-American athlete was one of them. So um, we met, and it was really a fairy tale romance. I mean, we really fell in love right away. And we got married 4 years later after I graduated from Pepperdine. And then we began our lives together in the Bay Area. Richard began his career as a bodywork therapist, a rolfer, if you know what that is. And then he realized quickly that wasn't going to be his end game. That was only a way to make a living until he could get his master's and PhD in psychology. So he began getting his master's and PhD in psychology right away as he was working as a rolfer and building a private practice. And he was a very successful rolfer. I mean, everything he did, he put his entire being into. And I started a business in graphic design and advertising. And so that was kind of our early years. Then we co-authored our first daughter, Jasmine, and she came along about 4 years later, and that kind of shifted my focus. Not, I still worked, but it shifted my focus a little bit more toward family, less toward work. And Richard was starting his career as an author at that point, so he had written his first book with his mom on a trip to the Falkland Islands. I think that's a whole adventure in and of
Oh,
itself.
this guy
But
sounds amazing. Like,
yeah.
oh my gosh.
wrote this
Is
book
he
called
real?
Yeah, Everything I Eat Makes Me Thin.
Mm.
And it was an affirmation book about weight loss. His mom was a really a marathon runner, had run like 46 marathons in her 40s. I mean, was just crazy marathon runner. And they just were having fun because they were on this 3-week adventure to the Iceland Falkland Islands to
That's
sit with
amazing.
penguins, like literally sat with penguins. And they first wrote this book, and he found his agent, Patty Brightman, which was a really amazing marriage between the two of them as agent and book author. And she was a top agent. She was John Gray's agent. She was, a lot of people's agent, Fit for Life. I forget their names. They were big at the time. She had a lot of top selling authors, and she took Richard on, but only after she sent his first manuscript back with like hundreds of red marks in it and hundreds of corrections. And she never expected to hear from him again because she really didn't think that anybody would go through every red mark and change every and honor every single correction. And he did. He sent it back like 2 months later with every correction saying, I really want you to be my agent. I hope that you find this to be a much more adequate manuscript to your eyes. And she read it and she was just like, oh my God, I love this guy. And then she hung in there with him for 10 years. He
Wow.
published 9 books in those 10 years, and Don't Sweat the Small Stuff was his 10th book. And
Was
he
that the
had
one
been
that really took off?
that was the big one that took off. But he had
Mhm.
been on Oprah prior to that. Like he had gotten on Oprah for another book, You Can Be Happy No Matter What. And he was on a
Mm.
panel, like as a panel guest on that show. And that's a really kind of cool story, actually, just to show your audience that when things take longer, usually people quit like right before they're going to have their big breakthrough. And he almost did. We were seated at a cafe one evening, and it was at our athletic club, and our kids had a babysitter. And I walked in, and Richard looked really despondent, which was very unusual for him because he was, you can imagine, just a truly upbeat person.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "What's wrong, honey?" And he said, "Well, I feel like we're not making enough money. Like I just feel like we have such big bills and we're getting more and more in debt." And he's like, "I feel like I need to get a real job." Like he was juggling 3 different entrepreneurial things at the time, but he's like, "I feel like I need to get a real job because I just don't feel like we're cutting it." And I was like, no, you can't do that. You got to stick with it. You're gonna be like, you're gonna have a break. I just know it. You're gonna gotta stick with it. And we left that evening, and I got home first. And when I walked in the door, the phone rang. And I'm not kidding you. This is the craziest story. I walked in the door, and the phone rang, and I picked up the phone. And this woman on the other end said, "Hi, this is Alice from the Oprah Winfrey Show. The strangest thing just happened about 15 minutes ago." She goes, "I was in our library looking for a book on stress management, and your husband's book fell off the top shelf, and the back hit me in the back of the head. I picked it up. It's the perfect book to be a panelist guest on our show. It's called You Can Be
Wait a
Happy No
minute.
Matter What." Is that
That
crazy?
is insane. So we gotta pause here for there's so many good things that you've said. Number one, like that reminder that you gave to the audience just a minute ago about how you kind of quit before that happens, right? Like it's the game of patience and continued belief, right, in yourself. And I always think about, you only have to be right one time, right? I always think about that. So if you keep going, the likelihood that you're going to be right is, it's going to increase, right? And so that's just such a powerful reminder on an amazing scale for someone that wasn't really seeing much results. Just incredible. But then you also mentioned how you encouraged him, right, at that moment, because that's like the second thing, right? Like who you marry is so important, right? And having that partner that's really going to encourage you to keep going and believes in you is just something that stands out. So then you get like, was it the same day you got the call from
It was
Oprah?
that night. I mean, that woman, that book hit her in the back of the head, probably the exact moment when Richard said he was going to quit. Like I'm not
Wow.
kidding you. It was the
And you
craziest
don't have
thing.
any superpowers we need to understand, right? You're not like that wasn't you, right? It could have been though. You
No, I
certainly.
don't know. It was divine, though. It was, I call it a divine intervention, and I've had many of those in my experience with Richard and even after his death. The divine intervention, I think, is when something is so out of the ordinary, divinely orchestrated that you can't deny it. And that was certainly one of those moments that when he walked in the door and she'd asked, could he be on a plane to Chicago tomorrow to be on the Oprah Winfrey show? It was one of those joy, tearful, like crazy, can you believe that just happened moments. And it showed us that I always knew, I mean, I knew that Richard was, I knew he would make it. I just knew in my heart and soul that this was his path, and he did too. But it took 10 years, and it wasn't as if he didn't get a lot of encouragement and breadcrumbs along the way. I mean, that book that he wrote with his mom, he got a $40,000 advance from Bantam, New York. I mean, he was on his way and had lots of breadcrumbs, but he hadn't hit it big.
Right.
Because what I think your audience has to understand is that Richard Carlson was a pioneer in the field of positive psychology, and he didn't even know it. He was paving a path for positive psychology to be birthed and for the ideas of mindfulness to become mainstream and all of that. But he didn't know that. He was
Mm,
just trying to make a living as a writer and an author, and he was
right.
taking these five principles of happiness that he wrote about, and he was just trying to find a new way to bring them to people where they could, understand them. And so when he wrote Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, he had seen a couple of small books that had taken that short, small chapter, and he understood why they were doing that because he realized that technology, email, and everything didn't actually give us more time. It shortened the time that we had because it took up more time took people's time, took their time in the car, took their time with their family. He realized that people were getting shorter and shorter attention spans. And so he decided when he wrote Don't Sweat the Small Stuff to write a totally different formatted kind of book. And I think he really was the one that brought that whole format to life because his book just took off so beautifully and sold so many copies. I think he sold, well, I know he sold 3.2 million in his first year, and that hadn't been done in the self-help arena at that point.
And so, and like what a gift he gave us all, right? To share that wisdom and that perspective that so many like, are in search of, right? Is the five principles of happiness, is that kind of like the inception of like all the philosophies of every book written?
It
And he just
is.
kind of goes
It
a little
is.
deeper? Okay.
Yeah, so he had studied with this group back in the 90s or in the 80s called Psychology of Mind. They're no longer called that anymore, but it was a group of psychologists that had gotten together based on this guy, Sid Banks, who had had this enlightened experience. And he had started to work with psychologists and bringing sort of these wider concepts of East meets West um, and bringing it to psychology. And so Richard had studied with them, and it was beautiful because everything that Richard was and every how he lived his life, this gave him an articulation to work with, to begin to really bring out to the public and to begin to, and his understanding of it was so deep
Mm,
that he was able to articulate for people this idea that I'll just share with you the five principles of happiness that are in his book, You Can Be Happy No Matter What. They are understanding thoughts, understanding moods, understanding feelings, understanding separate realities, and present moment living. And then, really, Richard was one of the very premier authors to really begin to drive home the practice of gratitude and how gratitude changed everything. And that just waking up, even like with a gratitude practice, was just so important to how you lived your entire day. It would change the entire emotional landscape of your day. And
yeah.
even if you're having a bad day, if you notice, if you could just stop and pause for a moment and take some deep breaths and think about what you're grateful for, that is in and of itself just an incredible way to shift your day and shift your mood and bring you
Reframing,
right.
right? It's like that
Yeah,
reframing.
reframing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
important because it's right. The other track of thinking, which is maybe the lower frequency way to think about things, it's easy to get there. I'm sure no matter, even if you're writing all these books, I'm sure you have those moments where you're kind of low frequency and you're reacting to things and you have to kind of bring yourself back and know what to do in those moments. So the five principles of happiness, give it to us one more time.
Their thoughts, understanding how thought impacts everything, how it's impossible to have a mood, which is the second principle, without having thoughts that indicate what your mood is going to be first. Like you can't have a feeling without having, like, you can just try it for a moment. If you just sit and you think about something that makes you really, really angry, you have to think the thing first and then you become angry. So thought is
Thoughts equal emotions, right? Like,
thought equals everything. Everything starts with thought. And the thing that we forget as humans is that, I mean, thinking is our superpower, but we don't use our brains in the way that they were meant to be used a lot of times. Like our whole amphibian brain takes over in our lives where it was never meant to take over your life. Your amphibian brain, that fight or flight part of your brain, was only meant to keep you safe in life. But our we don't have to do that so much necessarily, unless, of course, you probably people who are in war and people who are in survival mode are doing that because they have to.
mhm.
But our amphibian brain takes over, and then we become so like overthinking, where Richard coined a term that's really widely used today called analysis paralysis. People get into analyzing their thinking, analyzing what's wrong so much that it paralyzes them. They
That's
can't.
wild. I didn't know that was the so he coined that term.
He coined that term, yeah, and
I love
analysis
that because
paralysis.
I'm a big like commit first, figure it out after, right? Like if you want to write something, start writing, right? Don't think about, all the things that I could write and the process of writing, right? And then like all of a sudden you've talked yourself out of doing something. So in the book, the central idea is that, correct me if I'm wrong, like life is too short to let these small things control us. This sounds like the let them, the Mel Robbins of years and years ago. Like this started with you. What do you feel people misunderstood or misunderstand the most about this concept?
Well, I think what happens a lot is that people think that don't sweat the small stuff means you don't take care of the details of life, and that is a complete wrong turn on the concept of what it means. So I think don't sweat the small stuff means that you focus on what matters most to you and you let the little things that don't matter to you go. And that means in your relationships, that means in your work, that means in every aspect of your life. It's sort of like that idea with your kids, choose your battles, like, or with your spouse, choose your battles. Like you don't make everything a battle, or you don't turn everything into, you don't notice every negative thing that happens in your life. I mean, and I think the other part of the philosophy that's really powerful that he speaks to is just the habits that we are getting into in our thinking that create the habits of our lives. We are such habitual creatures, and we cannot forget that. I mean, I don't know about you, but in order to break, like for me, like to break like the dessert habit at night, I have to really like almost tie myself down with I have to like put something on my hands or put myself in there's
Oh,
certain
yeah.
habits that we have that
Mm-hmm.
they're really, really ingrained in us that are hard to break because we
Mm-hmm.
are so habitual by nature. And like you see, I often see so like I often see people get in the habit of negative thinking, for example. Like let's say you made a phone call to someone like your sister every single day and you only talked about what went wrong in your day the day before or what was going wrong in your life. That is a way that you start to categorize and log because you're going to have that phone call tomorrow morning. You're starting to like only notice the things that are negative that are happening in your life and you're forgetting the positive things. And what we want to do is switch that around and say, I want to notice the positive things that are happening in my life and forget the negative things because negativity breeds negativity and it brings you down. Well,
Right.
nobody creates anything positive necessarily when they're feeling negative. I mean, it's
No.
not that you can't, but you probably are more likely to create something really powerful and positive and make different choices for yourself when your natural state of wellness is ignited versus your negative bias. Does that
Right.
make a lot of sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about our thoughts create our lives. So what's more important to control than our thoughts, right? And what we're allowing in and what we're saying to ourselves, what we're hearing from others. It's so incredibly important. We think about like a real life takeaway from Don't Sweat It, right? Like what are some principles do you think, like let's say one top one you can apply at home and one top one that you can apply at work that you think is key for our audience.
Okay, so the one that you can apply at home is that, okay, this is a great one.
All right.
Let's say your spouse comes in and they're complaining about their day or your kids. You can listen and be a good listener. Really, we call it world-class listening. You know, you can be really a great listener, but what you don't want to do is commiserate. People don't need a commiserator, they need a good listener because if they're venting, that's okay. Venting is a natural part of life. You want people to be able to vent, but what you don't want to do is engage in the drama of the situation and make it worse by going, oh yeah, da 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 da, oh da 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 da, and just really get in it with them. What you want to
Uh-huh.
do is say, wow, that must have been really hard. Yeah, I get that. That must have been, I understand. I hear you. That must have been hard and then let it pass and try and talk about something, shift the conversation to something that's more positive. One of the strategies that I wrote in a book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff for Moms was instead of asking your kids or letting them respond to what's wrong with them in their day, ask them what was right in their day when they get in the car. Hey, what happened really good in your day today?
Hmm.
And get them in the habit of focusing on what happens really right in their lives versus what's happening wrong. I think that's kind of one of the more powerful things as that works both ways if you practice that as a person.
Gosh,
Um,
that's I'm wondering as you're saying that, like, why are so many of I do that all the time. Exactly what you just said. Like when some like I want someone to feel like, hey, I'm on your side. I get what you're saying. Like, yeah, you're right, but I also try to kind of diffuse, but then that's sometimes like you're offering a solution. Why do you think we tend to just kind of naturally want to get on that side with them rather than just naturally listening and just acknowledging and recognizing people just want to talk to us. They don't want us to be the solution maker of the problem. They don't want us to jump in with them and get them more mad. What's that natural tendency that we have that makes us do that?
well, I think it's partially that we've learned to engage in conversation with others, and that's part of showing that you're engaged. But I think it's
Mm.
also that most of us like to listen to ourselves talk. Like we we like to give advice,
Mhm.
and it's like it's kind of I think that's really the long and short truth of it is that really you have to ask people, do you want me to give you my advice or do you want me to just listen? Sometimes they really want your advice, but most people you'll find if you ask them that question, they probably just want you to listen.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I
and
think
and
if I
it,
put myself on the other side, like if somebody was stacking on my issue, I would, yeah, it would now, I would like start getting more angry rather than feeling like I just let something out.
yeah.
That's such a great tip for our listeners because look, all of this, like if you think about being a high achiever, like the audience, like we have to achieve that highest level of like respect with our listening, with our mind, with our thoughts, with our mood. So this just plays into everything. What about for work? Tell us about at work. What's the one thing we can apply from the book?
So there's the principle of happiness called separate realities. And, that is, it's kind of the simplest principle, but it's a game changer in how you relate to other people when you really understand it. So when we look at the idea that each of us as humans, even two people that are married, have completely different pasts and backgrounds. They might have similar values and similar beliefs, but deep down our beliefs are built on our background. They're built on the experiences we've had as a child, the mentors we've had or haven't had in our lives. And they could have mentored us in positive ways and negative ways. So, all of these beliefs that we have are really built on our history, who we are as people today. We've come from this tremendous history. So I think when you start to realize that while you may be in a situation where you like, let's say you're in a situation at work and you see it differently than somebody else, it's almost 100% of the time that people are going to see things differently because they're viewing the situation from their own lens. They're looking at it from their own filter system, which is built up by all this history that they've lived. So when you get in a conflict at work or when you feel judgmental of somebody at work, you have when you recognize that you don't maybe understand what the lens is that they're seeing the world through. It helps you to not only maybe create the questions that help you understand, but it'll help you speak to them with a lot more compassion and understanding. And I think that whole principle is a game changer as far as developing compassion and understanding in conflict. And it
Mm.
really works amazing in marriages too. So, but at work it's great because you understand that, wow, I want to know more about how this person is seeing this. So maybe you start to get curious about how they're viewing the situation and why. And you
And it's
begin
really
to
controlling your emotion in that moment, right? Because your tendency is to maybe get defensive, right? Or become argumentative or
reactive, yeah,
reactive.
versus responsive. And really, I think all of these principles together, that is at the core of what it teaches us as human beings is to be, there's a big difference between living at the effect of your circumstances or responding to your circumstances. People who are highly reactive are living at the effect of what they're experiencing versus somebody who can sit back and notice is a person who's cultivated that understanding of thought, somebody who can sit back and say, wow, I'm feeling myself. That's at the core of mindfulness too, like feeling yourself get a rise. Then you say, oh, what's that about? Like, okay, and you've got all this going on in your own thinking. You're not verbalizing it, but you're there with yourself, experiencing what you're feeling, and you're realizing, wow, I need to step back. I need to take a deep breath, and I need to not react in this
And
situation
by the
and
way, that's
just
all happening in like a matter of seconds,
a
right?
nanosecond. Yeah.
Right. And then you're like, okay, then next you have to think about what are you going to reply with, right? And I think
But
about,
that's the practice.
yes, you get better as you keep practicing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't, it's not like a one-time decision that you're going to become this way. It's like
Right.
it's an all the time practice. And, our thoughts, and let's just say, I'm sure you've heard this, but women have about 80,000 thoughts a day. Men have about 60,000 thoughts a day. Women are much greater at multitasking, which is why we have more thinking going on. Men are much more single-minded oriented. So if you have 80,000 thoughts going on in your day, you're doing a lot of thinking. How many of those thoughts do you think you're even recognizing? Only a few of them.
Mm. No, it's so true. And I think sometimes you have to circle back and you might have to have a conversation and say, hey, I apologize that, I feel like I didn't listen enough or I wasn't curious enough. I didn't really, listen to you with compassion or try to understand your perspective. The book, it offers some strategies, right, to put stress into perspective a little bit. Could you share kind of an example of, let's say, a common stressor that feels huge in the moment? And how you reframe it so it loses its power a little bit.
The really simple one that everyone can relate to is traffic.
Well, there you go. Yes, especially
I
if you
mean,
live
even
near
though
near a city, right?
Yeah, even though we work a lot from home now, a lot of people are still working very remotely and can avoid a lot of traffic. Everyone can relate to the idea of traffic and how frustrating traffic can be when you're trying to get someplace. So It's an idea that you can reframe traffic by just surrendering and trusting that, this is just where you're supposed to be. This is how you're supposed to spend your time. Now, somebody who knows they're going to be in traffic can really plan to use that time wisely. Like you could listen to podcasts, you could get
Mhm.
your phone calls done.
Right.
You can do all sorts of things and create a strategy around traffic. But, it's a common stressor. I mean, another one is like you show up at the airport and your flight is delayed, but you need to get someplace at a certain time.
Mhm.
That's really stressful. That used to catch Richard all the time. He's like, I know somebody's going to recognize me. I know I'm going to be recognized and I'm going to be
Mhm.
sweating the small stuff because I'm going to be trying to catch the next flight out of here from some other place in the airport.
Yeah. It's funny as you're saying this, I cut myself this morning. I'm walking the kids to the bus stop that way. We missed the bus by like a minute. So it said now we had to go to another bus stop. And that was like that one came 10 minutes later. And I said out loud, I was on the phone and the kids overheard me. I was like, this really kind of ruined my morning because it's setting everything back a little bit. And then I heard my daughter say, like, yeah, this ruined my morning too. And I had this moment, I was like, oh my gosh, no. Like I said, no, you know what? There's a reason we're supposed to be at this stop. Like, how cool is it over here? Like, we never walked this way. And I tried to reframe it because I recognized, man, they're catching on to me, allowing that stress to take over, right? In that moment. So
Well, and that's how you make change happen. It's just by
yeah,
what you did, by noticing it. It's
yes.
like if you don't notice it, it just becomes invisible and you just keep practicing the same old habit or the same old way of thinking. But as soon as you notice it, it is that interruption in your thinking that actually creates the new neural pathway, the opening for you to
Mhm.
make a change happen. And
Right.
and you did it just absolutely beautifully and practiced something that was really powerful for you, because you just said to your brain, "Oh no, no, we're not going there. No,
Yeah, what
no,
just
no,
happened? Yeah, and now I'm
no."
now I'm passing that thought process down to them, which made it even more worse. I might have stayed low frequency a little bit longer, but how do we know, like when you think about, people listening right now, obviously this is about not sweating the small stuff. But how can someone tell the difference between what's the small stuff and, that they should let go of and what's actually important to address head on?
Well, there's a great strategy and don't sweat the small stuff. And that is called ask yourself if this will matter a year from now. And,
Mm.
for example, I mean, I say to anybody, like what happened to me as a part of my story is that Richard got on a flight at the 10th anniversary of Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And he died on that flight. He passed away from a pulmonary embolism on the descent of that flight. And I was only 43 years old. He was 45. Our kids were in high school.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I can tell you that that was big stuff. That's been almost 18 years ago now, but that was big stuff. And when you're dealing with something big because first of all, if you were sweating anything the moment before that happened, that same amount of thing, whatever you're bothered by that day, it never hits your radar again. I mean, you don't even, it doesn't,
Mm.
everything that happens prior to a big moment like that in life doesn't matter. It's literally like you drop it from normal life into survival. And you start surviving your life at that point until you start healing. And so, the big stuff is really the obvious stuff. It's the stuff that doesn't go away in a year. It's the stuff that, you
Forever
know,
life changing, right?
yeah, yeah, like when somebody has to face a bankruptcy, that's pretty big stuff. It's life-changing. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean that you can't apply the same principles of mental well-being and health along the way, and I certainly did in grief. I certainly started to see my own thinking as destructive to my healing process because I started to really realize that to live presently, which was kind of ironic. I mean, Richard taught Oprah. I mean, she said on the air, you taught me how to live presently. And I somehow missed that lesson in the principles of happiness because I really learned it in grief. I learned that living presently was the safest place to be because if I focused on being present, I wasn't thinking about the regrets I had, the thought patterns I had, like why didn't I notice he was ill? Why didn't I notice that this was going to happen? How come I couldn't stop this? And when I would slip into those past regrets, I would think about like it would just put me in tremendous grief, like just the most painful grief you could imagine. And then
Mhm.
I would try and think of a future without him, and I couldn't see the next day without him. I could barely breathe
No.
without him when I first found out. So I think like there's those lessons and those principles of happiness that you that are actually very survival oriented that hit you. Like for me, it was survival was to live in the present moment so I could take care of my kids, so I could, do my life and still be in grief, but not be
Mhm.
replaying those thought patterns that were always putting me in such deep grief that I couldn't function, so
Wow. Yeah, I mean, what a powerful, I mean, I'm sure drawing from everything that you learned and been harnessing through all those years, while I'm sure that was one of the most difficult things ever to go through, I'm sure helped you to kind of get to where you needed to be, maybe quicker
I
than most.
realized, yeah, I realized that inadvertently I had grown this level of understanding and resilience that I didn't even know I had. Like I didn't realize what a powerfully resilient human I was. I had no idea because I hadn't been tested that way. But I started to really realize, wow, I'm a warrior, man.
Yeah.
I'm like, I somehow, everything in my life had led me to that moment of realizing who I was, and that was sort of where my memoir came in that became the Lifetime movie. It was really my story of going through this heartbreak, this just horrible heartbreak. Because, I mean, I've been in love since, but Richard is my person, like he will always be the
Yeah.
great love of my life. And I will always feel this deep connection to him, even though I have decided and chosen that this life is supposed to be full out, and I will not let that be disrupted by anything. That my love of life, I realized, is so much greater than anything that I know that I knew that I could get through this, but I didn't know when, I didn't know how long it would take. And
Gosh. Yeah, I
yes,
mean, the losing a partner in general and is so tremendously difficult and tragic, but then to have it be so sudden, I, I I can't even imagine. But kudos to you for finding love again and then and understanding that this is we only have one shot to go around here and we gotta live it to the best of our abilities. I'm sure you'd be very happy that you're living in the present in today and not in yesterday. And that's the philosophy you've been practicing for 10 years, so that's amazing. When I want to talk about the Lifetime movie because is this you said just a moment ago, I think this is how it kind of inspired it. You had Heather Locklear that played the role of you. Tell us about the Lifetime movie. What is it about, and how did that kind of come, and what are some of the biggest lessons people can learn from that movie?
well, I wrote a memoir that was about my first 2 years of grief after Richard died, and it really kind of was birthed out of my journal. I started journaling right away, and wasn't thinking of writing a book, but it was just so profound. I had been really broken open to just such incredible wisdom. I kind of felt like Richard was just tapping through my fingers most of the time, like really just was so connected to him through the writing that my memoir is called Heartbroken Open. And it's really about overcoming, like going through profound loss and coming out the other side to embracing a full and meaningful life. And it just showed me how I came back. I learned who I was in this process of loss that in Richard and I definitely, I feel like had this soul contract that I used to say when I met him, I used to tell people that loving Richard a lifetime wouldn't be long enough. I
Oh,
would say that over and over. He was such an incredibly special human, and he lit up everyone that ever met him. I mean, he just was this angelic light presence that was just so incredibly special. And so, but I had to learn how to live without him in form and connect to him in spirit, really, is how I did it initially. And this book really touches people. It's a sad story, but it's a very inspirational book. And it was picked up by Lifetime because of this wonderful woman, Maura Dunbar, who is a producer. She does a lot of Hallmark movies and stuff. Don't be looking her up or anything. She's very not just not taking any news stories or anything like that, but
Yeah, yeah.
she's amazing. And she had read our book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, when she had lost three family members in a very short period of time. And she described Don't Sweat the Small Stuff as being her main book that helped her through grief, which I thought was so ironic because it
Wow.
isn't a grief book, but what it does is it shows you a path to living life. And so Lifetime had been really interested in Don't Sweat the Small Stuff as a brand for a long time. And then Maura came to them. They came to Maura and said, "Is she still available to do something with Don't Sweat the Small Stuff?" And Maura said, "Yeah, I think so." And then we just decided that my story would be the story to tell. And so it was this just incredibly inspiring movie. It shows from the moment I got the phone call of Richard's death. And it shows me, as a woman who's struggling to bring my family together and moving through loss and also owning this idea that now I'm the brand leader. Like now I have to do what he did.
I have to carry the torch,
Yeah, I
right?
have to carry the torch. And it's so it is a really inspiring movie. And what was really awesome was that Heather decided to do it as her comeback movie into the she'd been out of like not working for many years, sort of semi-retired, and decided that she wanted to work again. And she was waiting for a very meaningful role to come along. And I mean, it probably Lifetime wouldn't have been necessarily her first, choice of a network, but she saw this role and she was like, this is an amazing role. I want to play this. Just woman, I want to meet her. I want to play this. I think this sounds like an amazing story. And when I'll never forget when I first got a text message from Heather Locklear because I was like telling you earlier off air that
Yeah.
we grew up in the same time. We're about the same age. She's maybe 1 or 2 years older than me. And I was just like, Heather Locklear was the icon actress of our era. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody in the world knew who Heather Locklear was at that
Yeah.
time. And so I was so thrilled to just have this contact with her. And she's such a cool person. Like,
Hmm.
she is so not impacted by her celebrity status and all that she's created and done. And she's just really down to earth. And when we met, I mean, we cried for like 24 hours. I mean, we were just constantly, she's like, "Oh my God, I have chills. Oh my God, I have chills." I would tell her all these stories and we just became such great friends. But what was so cool, I was sharing with you earlier, was that um, she had this college roommate, and she was telling me about her college roommates and a story she was sharing with me that because they came from the Bay Area, from Piedmont, which is where my husband grew up. And then she said the name of her college roommate, and I was like, "Oh my God, are you kidding me?" She goes, "What?" I go, "That was Richard's like first major crush in like he was
Oh,
13 years old and he only
oh
really
my God.
loved like three women and she was one of them." And I never forgot that because he wasn't like that. He wasn't like he just was a very single, like
Hmm.
serial monogamous kind of person. And he didn't ever fall in love a lot, but he fell in love hard with the women that he fell in love with. And there were only three of us, and she was one of them, his early crush. So
Oh,
I just, it was so crazy. She
what are the
was,
chances, right? Like,
yeah, no, it's just such a crazy, crazy story. And then it really helped solidify that she was in the right place, had made the right choice. And I, of course, knew that Richard was behind that. So,
yeah, I mean, gosh. And then before that, with the Oprah story, I think he had an angel or something, or either he had, it seems like he was incredibly intuitive and just like almost ahead of his time,
oh, he
and
was
a
psychic.
thought
Yeah.
leader, a thought leader.
He was a true thought leader. I would love to share one last story when we're ready to close because it's another incredibly powerful story that I think your audience will love. But that
Please.
we'll do that at the end, or if
Yeah,
we're
I
at
would
the
love
end.
that. I would love that. So, there's so much to ask you. I mean, you have, and I want to remind our listeners, the most exciting thing about having someone on that's an author is like, we're not going to get it all right here, but obviously some of these principles and what it's all written, right? I know you mentioned like journaling was a big part of your process to kind of overcome your grieving. And I thought that was a good thing to bring up for the audience because, a lot of people are grieving today and they're going through something, and whether it's reading a book or, listening to a podcast or something like that. But journaling is a very specific practice. Like not a lot of people can do that and do it well. How did you end up turning to journaling to try to heal? And was there like this turning point that happened in your process of doing this?
For me, it was to fill my early morning hours and to connect with Richard. So I had a very specific reason to journal. I did really feel like he was speaking to me through my journaling, and so that was initially how I started to journal. But it was very automatic. I wasn't trying to censor it. I was just journaling what I was experiencing, what I was
But before
feeling.
that, did you journal?
No,
Okay,
nope,
interesting.
nope. I had never really journaled prior to that. I had written Don't Sweat the Small Stuff in Love with Him and Don't Sweat the Small Stuff for Women. I'd written those two books before that, but I'd never journaled.
That's
But
incredible.
it was a great healing mechanism. Like it just provided that outlet of just being able to just pour my emotion into, words and just to express what was that and a lot of tears. I mean, I cried golf ball size tears. Like I was just that snotty, just messy tearing all the time. I mean, just,
Oh, I
and it
can't
was funny
imagine.
because I was never much of a crier prior to that. I would have to sit and try to have a good cry when I really felt like I needed one.
You're like, I have
And
too much control of my emotions right now. Now I can't even feel sad anymore.
yeah, and even to this day, I barely cry anymore. Like I'm such a joy-oriented person naturally that I can't make myself to be in a bad mood very long.
Hmm.
Like I just vacillate toward joy so much of the time, even if I have something I'm deeply worried or concerned about, or somebody hurts my feelings or whatever. I just heal and recover very quickly now.
Hmm.
So and I think I always did, but I do think as a mother, um, it would have helped me a lot if I could just sit down and just cry my frustration out, because growing up kids is probably the hardest job that we do. At least it was for me. And,
Oh yeah.
just feeling like all the frustration you feel at just having so much responsibility, not always having the answers, that, there's no time for you in the picture. Like I went through all of that as a young mother.
Yeah, there's so many transitions we go through in life, and you add a big one of transitioning, not having a partner in your life, raising kids. When you talk about helping women, right, you talk about helping them awaken their highest selves during these transitions. Could you share like one practice, whether it be, and maybe it is journaling, and you could give us a little bit more about that, but is it meditation, is it reflection or action, something that listeners can start today if they want to awaken their highest self?
Well, honestly, it isn't, all of those things are amazing, but what I have found with anybody that's really gone through what I call an identity annihilation, I don't call it an identity crisis, I call it an identity
It's gone.
annihilation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually that person is left very vulnerable and raw and feeling very uncertain about who they are. But there's also an incredible opportunity when your identity is at such a low place. It also means that your ego mind is at a very low place. As
Hmm.
long as they feel safe, and they can create this feeling of safety for themselves, it's actually a really beautiful place to sit with yourself and really get to know yourself, who you really are, outside of all the roles, outside of the expectations, outside of all the things that you think you're supposed to be, because you no longer are those things. Your life is shattered, you're in pieces, and now you get to start from a place of really truth. Like, who are you now? And I think that's one of the most beautiful questions that people can ask themselves
Right. Who are you
is
now? Right. Like
who are you now?
I liken it to like it's like a blueprint almost, right? And you had this whole blueprint for what your life was supposed to look like, what it looked like. And now it's like it just turned the page and now it's blank. And you're coming from a place where you're grieving or you're stressed or something's going on in your life. So it's a hard place to create from and try
It
to think
is.
about that.
I have a course that I designed for exactly this person, and it's called What Now? And I didn't
Wow.
say what, I didn't call it what's next.
Right. What now? Yeah, because you got to start. So tell us a little bit about what now, because I think that would be a great transition here.
Yeah, so I think when you sit down and you realize that you've lived this life, and many of us just lived a life that was in front of us to live. We didn't live a life that was necessarily purpose driven. We lived a life that we had to live in order to pay the bills, in order to, just get onto the next stage in life. But I think that at midlife, especially, most people have been through something pretty big at midlife. And it's either, the loss of their parent, or they've gone through, some sort of huge heartbreak, or we don't meet people in their 50s that haven't been through something, generally, a health crisis, all those things that literally create an identity crisis, or an identity annihilation, like I call it,
Hmm.
loss of a partner or spouse. And really, what you have to realize is it takes a very deep inquiry. And it really is the questions that you ask in these places of yourself that will help you define the steps that you need to take to really move forward in life, because people get stuck. They get stuck in these. My friend Christina Rasmussen, who's amazing, wrote a book called Second Firsts, and she has this thing that she calls the waiting room. I call it this place of not here, not there, where you're just in this place of not a paralyzed fear, where you can't step forward because you can't step back, but you can't step forward. People get stuck in this place and can get stuck in this place for years in grief.
Never
So
get
when
out of it.
yeah, so what you have to do is you have to realize that you've got to get to know who you are now, and that means that you have to ask yourself, what do I value now? Where are my core values now? Because they're going to be different than when you were in your 20s, 30s, or whatever. Every 10 years, our core values change and shift because we change and shift. We acquire things, we acquire achievements, we have failures, we have all sorts of things that happen in our lives that shift our core values. And so, core values are really important toward creating your own blueprint for stepping forward. And then, if you start to ask yourself, who were you when you were a child before you lived this life that changed the direction of who you became, And I think some of the things that we loved as children are the things that we truly love and that we don't actually operate from. So
Mhm.
I try and get people to look back, to look forward. And then I also, I also think that one of the things I've noticed, and I've asked myself this many times because I see these transformations that happen with women that come on my retreats with me. And I started to really realize, what is it? Like, what is it that actually creates the transformation? And there's really one guiding thing that happens that I've noticed over and over and over again. And that is that we go through what is really known as survivor's guilt. And it's very paralyzing for people. And they do feel guilty that they survived and their spouse or their person that they loved
Right.
did not.
Hmm.
And it paralyzes them. And so I realized that what I give them and what I they learn from me is that they need to give themselves permission to move forward, to live their lives fully. And what I always say, I know I can always identify the women because I see it in their sadness. I see the sadness in their eyes, and then I watch them light up the next day, and I see the light bulb turn off. And the thing that always gets them is I say, if this were reversed and he was alive and you died, what would you want to say to him from the other side? What would you want for him? And
Hmm.
100% of the time they'd say, well, I would want him to live the rest of his life in joy. And
Right.
I'm like, Exactly.
Exactly.
Bingo. You
So,
know,
right. You sometimes you just need to kind of reverse things and you start to see things a little bit more clearly. What would in a lot of what we've just spoke about, right? I mean, I think
yeah.
so you have courses, you have retreats. How many retreats do you do per year?
Well, I usually do about 3 to 6 retreats a year. So I have a book writing retreat that I lead with my business partner Deborah Evans in a company that we have called Book Doulas.
Love that.
That's a whole other thing, which is really a real passion of mine is to help other people write their books. And so I have a writing retreat. Then I have a What Now retreat, which is people come that have taken the first 4 parts of the course, and then we do the more transformational work at the retreat. I do that
Incredible.
once per year, and then I do a fun retreat. Like I have an Italy retreat coming up. That's
I saw
just
that on
yeah.
September 27th, right?
Yeah, it's just for fun. It's like we do some transformational work at the retreat, but it's more to connect everyone. And but the women still go through like they come and they go through a transformation there too.
Oh
So
my gosh. I mean, well, there's something to be said about being in person, being in community. I mean, courses are great and podcasts are amazing and writing is good, but when you're there and you're experiencing something, I think it's pretty impactful, right? I'm
yeah,
glad you're
so
covering all the bases for people too.
yeah, that's been my joy and m part of my life purpose is to do all of these things. I mean, I remember I went to like who Brendan Burchard is.
Yeah.
I remember I went to his early expert academy and, just to learn about, technology and all of that. And I remember he said, you have to just pick one thing and own it. And I was like, oh no, that's so not me.
Yeah. Like I need multiple things at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, it's multiple things
Yeah.
at the same time and it keeps me really just feeling so alive and generating a lot of, just good stuff in the world. I mean, that's at the end of the day, we get like this one great life and we get to decide, not what happens to us. Like we don't get to decide every circumstance that happens to us, but we do get to decide how we move forward and how we embrace the rest of our lives.
We do.
And yeah.
That's a great reminder for anyone that is feeling stuck, right? You remember reminding yourself that it is your decision. And I think there's so many women, Kristine, that could benefit from jumping in and diving into your books and then being a part of your courses. I love what you're doing. I think it's incredible. I want to hear the story though that you
Yeah.
kind of teased us with before we end.
Well, it's a story that I almost end every speech with because it was so powerful and it's such an incredible story. Um, so it happened 2 years after Richard died, and I was getting on a flight, a commuter flight with my 2 daughters. We were leaving my parents from Eugene to San Francisco, which is a very short flight. It's about, an hour and 10 minutes. And we were on a small plane. And when we walked up to the ticket agent was this really sweet Polynesian gentleman. And he was like, it was the holidays. He said, oh, you guys aren't seated together. Would you like to be seated together because it's the holidays? And I was like, no, they're teenagers. They don't care, and
Hmm.
it's such a short flight. But he took it upon himself to rearrange our seats. And so we were seated together.
Hmm.
Well, when we got on the plane, the passenger side, it was a small plane, the passenger or the window side was open, and I was seated in the aisle, and the girls were on my right. And this man walked up and he stood in front of us, and I looked at him and I had this weird feeling come over me, like this whole full body chills came over me. And my girls started giggling. And I had to get up and let him in to sit next to me. And in my head, I'm like, oh my God, I have to talk to this person. I kept going over and
Hmm.
over in my head, I have to talk to this person. And he pulls his computer out. And so, of course, I'm not going to be that person, like, and, and disrupt
You're
his
like
work.
looking over.
But so I quieted down. I didn't try and talk with him. And on the descent of the flight, he put his computer away, and I still had that feeling, just really overwhelming feeling. So I struck up a conversation with him and I asked him, is this a work day for you? And he said, oh yeah, I'm really sorry. I would have loved to chat it. I have a meeting when I land. And I said, and he goes, what about you? I noticed you have your computer. And I said, oh, yeah, technically every day is a work day. I'm a writer. So he goes, oh, have you been published? And I said, well, you might be most familiar with my late husband, Dr. Richard Carlson's work. He wrote Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And I didn't, and I looked over at him and he was just uneasy and he was looking around and he was just looked really
Oh
uncomfortable
no.
suddenly. And I said, what? Did you know him? And he just was like, he was stunned. He goes, no, I didn't know him. And I go, what? And he goes, took a deep breath and he goes, did he die on a flight to JFK a little over 2 years ago? And I was like, yeah, how
I
did
just
you know
got
it was
chills. Oh my God.
JFK? And he goes, because I was seated directly behind him on that flight. I was the
Oh,
first to assist the crew in helping lift his body out of his seat.
oh my God. I have chills all over, like literally all over my body right now. That
And
is
he
incredible.
and he said, I always wanted to tell you, I knew he had a family, and I always wanted to tell you that he had the most peaceful look on his face, that he died with the most peaceful look on his face. And I just burst into tears. I was just
Oh,
like, I burst in and I said, what are the chances of this? He goes, oh, there are no chances of this. Like, he was like blown
zero.
away. He's like, there's no chances of this. My girls are like looking at us like, what is going on over there? Because I'm
And
just,
the craziest thing is that you felt it, right? Like,
and they felt it.
yeah, they
They
were
were
like
giggling.
something was making them feel uneasy or whatever, nervous or something.
Yeah. And then
Wow.
the guy at the ticket counter felt it because he had to rearrange our seats.
Oh my gosh, that too. Oh
Yeah, it
my
was
goodness.
crazy.
Wow.
That's what I mean, divine orchestration, everyone.
Yeah. And you know what? I bet it has a lot to do with your living in the present philosophy
Totally.
because you can feel
Totally.
like if you're always somewhere else, you're never gonna you're walking by those things probably every day.
You're
And
missing the nuance of the present moment, the nuance
right.
that really it informs you. Like I was informed that I had to talk to this person.
Yeah.
I heard it.
I did a keynote speech for a women's conference here for one of our local chambers in New Jersey, and we did it on the science of luck. And we talked about the formula to creating luck in your life, and one of them was opportunity. That was one of the components of the formula: preparation plus opportunity plus action, right? And that opportunity piece, like, could come in. I mean, it doesn't need to just be like financial. It could be a spiritual opportunity, but it talks about how if you're not aware, if you're not even if like you're not expecting it, that those things can happen. If you're closed off to that even being in the realm of possibilities, the more you can open your heart and your mind and really expect that things like that can happen to you, they will, right? It's just so powerful.
Absolutely. And I think I had had so many experiences with Richard in life that I was really primed for seeing the opportunity here and for understanding it after it happened and even, while it was happening, just seeing it for what it was, which was such a gift to me. I mean, he wouldn't have known it, nobody else knew, but I was praying to meet somebody on that flight because I wasn't there. And I never had any contact with anyone that was on that flight with Richard until that man spoke to me. And so it was such a huge pivot turn toward my healing and such an
Wow.
answer to a very, very deep longing I had to know. And it was just incredible. Like I'll never underestimate the power of what you deeply, deeply need and want to heal and how you can somehow attract that into your world, especially when the stakes are so high for you, especially when the stakes were really high for me to heal and to overcome because I had a lot of people that I've impacted that were counting on me and I didn't even know it yet, but I
Mhm.
had a lot of people that I was supposed to help along the way. And so the stakes were really high for me to heal.
Right. Gosh, yeah, right. Because you now you have to kind of live by that example and live by that philosophy as best as you can. But doing it live and then writing your book and your memoir and the movie. Just I tell all of our listeners, I feel like these books are probably like Bibles, right? There you go back and you read them again and you get reminded of these things that we can oftentimes, just forget, and we can fall into this space where, we need to keep practicing and keep being aware. But I love everything that you represent. It's incredible stories that you've shared with us. I want to ask you a couple like rapid fire questions here, just some things that you can leave our audience with. What's one like joy creator in your life that just something like you'll never skip over? Like I have to do this. This is what will create the most joy in my life, keep me most present. What's that thing for you?
Oh, it's probably my dog Bodie.
What kind of dog is Bodie?
He's a golden retriever. I've
Oh,
always had a golden retriever, but this one is really very exceptional, very smart, very communicative golden. And yeah, he just brings so much joy to my life. And, he's a puppy. He's not even two, but he's a very wise, like he's just been laying here the whole time. He knows when I'm working. He doesn't bother me. He doesn't ask for anything. And as soon as I get up, he'll get up and it'll be our time. And
wow.
consistently brings joy to me. And also just the practice of focusing on gratitude. Like that immediately inspires joy in me every single time.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. How about like your one of your biggest mantras? I mean, I know we talked about analysis paralysis, which is like I think everybody I know says that, so it's incredible that that came from your late husband. But how about for you? Is there a mantra or is there something that you repeat to yourself that keeps you going?
Yeah. In fact, it was the mantra that led me through loss, which is surrender, trust, and accept. I added a few to that. When I was first in loss, I would just say, surrender, trust, and accept, surrender. It works pretty good in traffic too, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Surrender,
Surrender.
trust, and accept.
Yeah, I love that. Surrender, trust, and accept. So in surrendering, how is like surrendering and accepting different? Like where's the delineation there?
Well, surrender means that you are recognizing the difference. It's kind of the serenity prayer shortened. You're recognizing the difference between something you can and cannot change.
Mm-hmm.
The things that you cannot change, you've got to surrender to. You have to allow yourself to be open to trusting that there is a plan for this, that something good will come from this, that you
Mm-hmm.
can't change this. So you've got to be in it. And
Like kind of letting go of the control, like the control, right? To some
yeah,
extent.
letting go of a lot, like letting go of, even expectation about what the outcome is going to be. I mean, surrender is about allowing yourself to open to what is.
Mm.
And that's such a profound thought and idea, but you have to be open. When you're surrendering in grief, you've got to allow yourself to be open to healing, open to expressing grief, open to every moment being different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the trust part is about trusting that what you need and what you desire will happen for you. What you need and what you desire is going to be what is present. And then acceptance comes after you're able to release. I talk about my mantra is really called the STAR mantra that I teach in my work. It's surrender, trust, accept, release, and receive. Um,
Oh.
you you acceptance is about knowing that you're going to receive a new plan for life.
Mm-hmm.
Accepting, you have to accept that this loss has happened and that your dream has changed in order to actually step into a new dream, in order to step into a new plan for your life. Before acceptance, it's impossible. Like you can't. You haven't accepted it. You will not be ready to open yourself to what is possible until you go through that portal of acceptance.
Gosh, so many gems. It's one of my favorite things about hosting a podcast is how much I learn from people like you, and I hope our audience got a tremendous amount out of our time today. And thank you for staying longer than initially anticipated. It's been a great conversation. I'll just remind the audience if this is resonating with you, if you know someone that needs to hear this, leave a comment, share this with someone that you think it could really help. Go check out KristineCarlson.com, where all the things that we talked about today are her courses, her retreat, her books.
Oh, a new book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff Every Day, just came out this last year.
Hey, there you go. I like the size of that too. Nice and like compact.
Yeah, because
Absolutely.
it's 365 practices, simple ways to live a life you love. So
Did you read one of them every day kind of a thing? Is that
yeah, yeah,
okay? I
they
love that.
they compiled out of there's 9 books in the series, the Don't Sweat series. They took 365 of those best chapters and put them in this book and edited them down to be just 1 page a day.
Wow, that's incredible. I'm gonna get that one right now. I have like, gosh, I'm sharing this episode with people that I know need to hear this and need to know you. So Kristine, if there's one thing you could leave our audience with that you want them to take away from this podcast, what would it be?
It's something that Richard said to me while we were hiking a hill just about 3 months before he died. He said, Chris, what I love so much about human beings, and he said had the pleasure of meeting many of them, is that they can take their worst circumstances and turn it into something that gives their life greater meaning. And that the circumstances of life don't have to make or break you, but they rather reveal who you are. And I think for anybody who's struggling, just to realize that it's tough when you're in the struggle, but if you can hold yourself to looking for what is light, what is positive, a breadcrumb of excitement to move you forward in life, and you can stop living at the effect of your circumstances and start realizing that down the road, if when you get through this, you're going to see how this happened for you and not to you. You're going to see how this made you stronger, how it made you wiser, how it gave you an opportunity that you maybe can't yet see, but it will happen and it will be there for you. And I think that would be the message I would want to leave with you today.
Amazing. That's an amazing message to leave and a great reminder for everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We're going to have all of Kristine's information in the description notes here. Go check her out, follow her, and let's learn from everything that she's offering us and taking her time to teach us. So thanks, Kristine, and thank you for joining us, guys.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much. It was great, Nicole. Thank you.
So glad you came.